That's why you never should get into a position without first listening to see if God even wants you to be in that position. They're invaluable. They're rare. They're priceless. And they know they're invaluable. They know they're valuable. They're readable. You're able to look at them and read them like a book. They're readable. They're not sneaky. They're not conniving. Who they are is who they are. They don't have no hidden chapters. They're who they are. They're readable. And last but not least, they are teachable. They are willing to be taught. They are forever students, forever disciples. I love that. Are you whole? Next word, enough. Enough means grace for, supply for, the capacity for. I'm enough. I have the grace for my wife. My wife has the grace for me that has been given and deposited to her, measured to her by God, God's grace for her, right? And God's grace for me, that when we come together, we're graced for the race with each other. Before you get in a race with a man, before you get in a race with a woman, ask yourself, is this race graced? Is this race graced by God? Because if it's not graced by God, it's not going to go through. If you never press through anything, if you haven't realized what it means to be healthy, empathetic, and gracious, then you're not, and you're partnering with the wrong one, then you ain't gonna have enough. They'll waste that grace of yours. They'll waste that enoughness of yours on other things. But if y'all two were graced for each other, then y'all will have this supernatural grace to finish y'all's race with each other, right? So grace enough means I have the grace for, the supply for, and the capacity for. That's why I don't want to hold anything that I'm not whole for, because God measures a certain amount of faith, a certain amount of grace for a thing. When you hold on something not grace for, that thing will break you. All right. I don't want anything. I don't want to hold anything that I am not graced for by God to hold, or whole enough to hold. God knows when me and my wife are whole enough to hold children. God knows when me and my wife are whole enough and whole enough to hold millions. He knows. That's why I'm not going to be a villain or a civilian. I'm going to be the one I need to be to hold millions. I'm going to be the one I need to be to hold my children. But at its perfect timing, I have the supply for. My wife only gets a certain supply. She's exclusive. My children are going to get exclusive supply. I may be a father figure to many, but when them little edges come out, they're going to get a certain level of supply that the kids that I'm a father figure not going to get the supply of. All right? You hear what I'm saying? Now, next point. Your enough versus his enough. Big difference. That's why you can't rely on your degrees, your education, who you know, what you know, all that knowledge, all that experience. That's enough. That's cool. That may be enough, but there's a difference between your enough and his enough. See, his enough makes me enough, right? For the stuff, for the rough, for everything, right? But when you get so focused on your enough, you ain't enough for the stuff. You ain't enough. I'm not enough. So I have to realize the balance between my enough and his enough. So when I find myself where my enough is empty, I can switch gears into the one that's fully enough. But is God enough for you? Is he your everything? Are you connected to him? Do you know how much he loves you? Because the love of God, the perfect love of God, we're not talking about the problematic love of this world. We're talking about the perfect love of God is what casts out all fear. The reason why we're fumbling is because we're full of fear. The reason why we're not holding things right, because we're full of fear. We're afraid of who we are. We're afraid of who we could be. We're afraid. That's why the enemy comes in raids, because we're afraid. But when you know that God's enough, then when you feel empty, fill you up to the full capacity to do things supernaturally. So there's a big difference between your enough and his enough. That's why I got to say, hey, you may be whole enough financially to be a husband, but are you whole enough spiritually to be a husband? Are you whole enough mentally to be a husband? Are you whole enough emotionally to be a husband? You may have a lot to offer to the table of a marriage as a woman, but you can't just say, hey, I'm whole enough for all these different traits, but are you whole enough holistically? You may be able to say, that's why you can't put nothing in no woman if you ain't. See, it is not the ground that's responsible for the seed. It's the one that plants the seed. That's why men run away from women, run away from their children, because they were bold enough and full enough to plant the seed, but they wasn't enough to grow the seed. It is not the ground's responsibility to a degree. The ground plays a role. It's the farmer, the one who plants the seed. Even though the woman carries the child for 9 months, it's the one that planted the seed that has to guard the seed, protect the seed, steward the seed, direct the seed, and make sure that the ground stays stable, the woman. So people got to stop just planting and doing all these different things without assessing, am I whole enough? Am I capable of sustaining a thing? That's what makes choices a little bit more heavier now. Then when you measure, that's why I heard Bizzle say, I think I posted on my Instagram. I'm gonna make sure I pull up. Okay, I got my anyway. He said the weight of sin will be always greater than the weight of pleasure. The consequence of sin will last longer than the moments of pleasure. That's why you got to think it through real quick for time's sake. The definition of enough means that you're adequate for the want or need of. Adequate for. What my wife wants, I'm adequate for. What my wife needs, I'm adequate for. And if I'm not in my current frame, I know the Spirit of God stays the same and keeps me able to gain and help my wife gain. Enough also means sufficient for the purpose of. If you don't know your purpose, then you won't know the sufficiency you need to have for the purpose of anything. Because when you know your purpose and the purpose of the things that you want to hold, or the purpose of the children you're currently holding, or the purpose of the man that you're currently holding, and y'all holding each other, the purpose of the ministry you hold, and the purpose of the business hold, then you're not going to be sufficient for it. The Bible says His grace is sufficient. And if you're running a race that God ain't grace for, then you can't get mad when God doesn't endorse it. God just doesn't endorse everything. That's why a lot of these marriages are struggling. Now, don't get me wrong. God can redeem a marriage. God can redeem children. God can redeem it all. But you have to be renewed for it all. So what I'm saying is, but if you keep partaking in and keep engaging in things that God didn't grace for, you can't get mad at God when He doesn't endorse it. What happens when the athletes get into situations and then Nike, Adidas, Puma starts pulling their endorsements away because they endorsed you in the character they knew? Then we start engaging different things that they didn't know about. They have to remove themselves so they won't be equated with. God cannot be equated. He doesn't relate to sin. So when you're in sin, His grace may be sufficient for the salvation in you, but it won't be. God ain't gonna grace that business of sin. God's gonna grace that love of sin. He's not gonna grace that. You now got to learn how to navigate and now God may not cause everything, but He can make you by any cause. So that's what should give you a time to pause. Is this cause going to lead to a consequence that I don't want to be with? Let's keep going. This is just the first one, man. Let me get through this quickly because me and my wife have some. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to engage more content, make sure you check out the videos over here. If you want to learn more about the books that I've written or the cars that I've created or ways that you can support and engage with what I do online, make sure you check out the links in the description box below. And if you've been watching this far, you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and subscribe, hit that bell, and make sure you leave a comment. I would love to read it and would love to engage and be your coach online. I'll see you on the next video. Peace.